Good evening. My name is Sherry Carter Allen, and we are excited that you have chosen to join us tonight at the Peoria Town Hall debate that is sponsored by Collaborative Peoria and the Monday Gathering, where we are streaming live from the beautiful facilities of the Frank Campbell Community Center. Tonight, and tomorrow night, we will be presenting candidates that are running for city council seats in Peoria districts that have become the most controversial according to citizen interest. Those districts are Peoria City Council District 1, 2, and 3. Last evening, we focused on Council District 1. Therefore, tonight's town hall debate will focus on Council District number 2. Also, as you may notice, we have live audience participation. Each candidate was allowed to invite 10 participants, which have been appropriately distanced according to COVID-19 mitigation. Now, without further ado, I will introduce to you our moderator for the evening. Mr. Leon Hendricks, who currently is the Assistant News Director for WEEK TV, was born in Chicago, Illinois, and received his bachelor's degree in broadcast news from Illinois State University in 1992 and his master's degree in 1995. Mr. Hendricks has performed multiple duties at WEEK, starting as a news photojournalist in 1996, then moved to the Creative Services Department as the Creative Services Assistant Manager, then migrated to the assignment desk as assignment manager, and again currently serves as the assistant news director for 25 News. Recently, Mr. Hendricks won the impressive Edward R. Murrow Award for excellence in journalism, and just before that, an Emmy for hard news reporting. When he's not at WEEK, he is a non-emergency transport for advanced medical transport. Mr. Hendricks currently serves on the board of directors for the George Washington Carver Community Center. Mr. Hendricks is the proud father of two amazing children, Julian, who is a 25-year-old tradesman, and Kira, who is a freshman at Richwoods High School. His most prized accolade is that he became engaged last month to Ms. Yolanda Cummings. I introduce to you Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you. You know, I was forced to acknowledge my fiance, so that's the way I have to start all of my duties whenever I'm in front of a microphone. So thank you, Ms. Sherry. I really appreciate that. And the purpose of this town hall debate is to give our candidates one final opportunity to inform and educate our voters regarding their political platform and clearly communicate those platforms and those plans for the 2nd District. So here are the rules for what we're going to be doing today. Each candidate, both of you, will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. After those opening statements, each candidate per questions will be given 2 minutes to answer the questions, and then you'll be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. And once the stop sign has been given from Devon, if you want to show us that stop sign so you guys know clearly when we're going to be asked to stop, we want you guys to quickly start to wrap up your oration so that we can continue going. Let's see here. After we ask the questions that reflect Council District 2 citizens' concern, we'll give another 2 minutes for audience members, from 2 audience members from Councilman Grayeb's side and 2 audience members from candidate Kobak's side. So 1 question for each or either candidate and as they choose. After all questions have been asked, each candidate will be asked to give a 2-minute closing statement. Everyone understand what we're doing here? Councilman Grayeb, candidate Kobak. Yes. I'll now introduce you to our candidates. To my right here, to your left, will be incumbent Councilman Chuck Grayeb. And to my left and your right will be candidate Peter Kobak. Councilman Grayeb, we will now start with your beginning statements for 2 minutes, please.
I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I want to thank Sherry Cannon for waiting a little bit longer than probably she should have for me to confirm my ability to be here. I have a family member who is suffering from cancer, and I thought I was going to have to take him to Chicago for treatment, but I was able to get a substitution. Not just anybody can drive the interstate highways around Chicago, especially when we're spoiled and live in such a wonderful city as Peoria, where you can be almost anywhere in about 15 minutes. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope that our current president is able to make good, Joe Biden, on that moonshot initiative to make cancer a thing of the past. I know that that's a great goal. Kennedy had a goal in the 60s to put a man on the moon by the time the 60s were out, and we did achieve that goal, but this cancer goal is also very, very important. I'm Chuck Grayeb. I've lived in Peoria all my life. I'm a graduate of Bradley University, and I taught the children of District 150 for some 33 years. I love Peoria. I've had the high privilege of serving as both an at-large councilman as well as District 2 councilman. And I hope that the next 4 years will bring nothing but the best for the people of Peoria. We're coming out of a pandemic, and I continue to believe that our best days are ahead, even though we have challenges. And I think that working together, we will make Peoria an even greater city than it is today.
Thank you, Councilman Grayeb. Now, candidate Kobak will now begin with your 2-minute opening statement.
Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the hosts, to Monday Gathering and Collaborative Peoria for having us here in the Frank Campbell Center in River West. Thank you to PHA as well. My name is Peter Kobak, and I like to start any introduction during the campaign by talking about how much I love the 2nd District. It's my home, and just like you care for your home, I've cared for the 2nd District. I've served on the board of my neighborhood association. I've been a representative to the West Bluff Council. And when it snows, I've shoveled sidewalks in front of businesses. I've raised money and funds for the Westmark Food Pantry in Westminster Presbyterian Church, as well as the Porch Pantry on Ellis Street. And I've tended the gardens and weeded the areas in the West Main Street Community Garden, as well as the Western Avenue Greenway. But I've also made a career out of helping government do more good for more people. I used to work at City Hall, where the projects that I was involved with were praised by city leaders, including by Mr. Grayeb, as being innovative and efficient. I've worked at Peoria Public Schools, where I recruited teachers, young people from across the country to come to Peoria and live here, continue their careers here in Peoria. Now I work at the Peoria Park District, where I'm expanding programs for youth outside of school. And tonight, I have a feeling that you'll hear Mr. Grayeb say that my ideas, that they're too radical. And I understand why someone who has been running for office since 1993 might be opposed to change. But through all my experiences working in government, working in the community, I know that we can't keep doing the same things we've always done. I've learned the root causes of our challenges, of systemic racism, of poverty decline, and of our poverty increase and population decline. So to take on these challenges, I'm suggesting nearly 20 policy ideas and programs that will move the 2nd District forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that, sir. Now, we'll begin with your 2-minute questions. We're going to start with Councilman Grayeb. Can you tell us why you're seeking re-election for the office of councilperson of the 2nd District, and what separates you from candidate Kobak?
First of all, I believe that we have the opportunity to reshape the heart of the city, which is where the 2nd District is. It's an iconic district with great housing stock, heritage housing, heritage neighborhoods, reaches from Ward Drive all the way down to King, everything east of Knoxville pretty much, and then down again to King. We have monies with the help of our state lawmakers to help rebuild Knoxville, Western, and Main Street. The infrastructure, as I think everybody in this room will agree with me, is in terrible condition. And working with our state lawmakers, we have secured that money, and I want to work with the people of the 2nd District, whom I've come to know very well and love, to rebuild these vibrant corridors and make them even better for our people. So that's why I want to run. Also, I do believe that my emphasis on core basic services distinguishes me from my opponent. I would never in 1,000 years recommend reducing the number of police who patrol our streets. I am, however, a strong advocate and will continue to be, and I'm working very closely now on doing what we can to further beef up our mental health services, especially in the wake of the pandemic. I also strongly believe that it was a travesty for any fire station to close in this city, whether it be on the south side or anywhere, because our fundamental first responsibility is public safety. So I'm going to continue to work to provide the safety for our citizens, and I will never support a handout to the fat cats, such as the council members agreed to do when it gave some $8 million to the Pierre Marquette. That has put the city even farther behind. As for me not being a go-along person, not true. Ask the mayor sometime.
Thank you, sir. Candidate Kobak, if you'd like to have a 1-minute rebuttal.
No, I'm ready to answer the question as well.
So the question to you will be, is why are you seeking an election for the same office, and what separates you from Councilman Grayeb?
Yeah, so I started mentioning this in my introduction. I've worked in government and I've worked in community, and I've come to understand the deep challenges that our community is facing. I mentioned systemic racism. We can look at numerous reports that have shown that in the Peoria area, we have one of the most segregated housing stock in the country, and we have one of the most segregated school systems in the country. It's actually more segregated now than it was 40 years ago. In Peoria, the poverty rate is over 20%. It's just around 20% in the 2nd District. Where we are right now, in the 1st District in 61605, it's nearly 40%. And finally, we've been sued by the EPA for decades for neglecting our environment. Our city still does not have environmental goals set to push us forward and show that we care about climate change and environmental justice. So I saw these challenges, and I started doing the research and talking to my neighbors about what they'd like to see to do things differently. Because like I mentioned with those statistics, things have been bad not just today, but we've been facing these challenges for decades. And what we've been doing for decades, maintaining the status quo, it's not going to get us out of this mess. So something I don't always share, but my parents are immigrants, and they escaped an oppressive communist regime to come to this country and start a better life for me. And we didn't grow up with much, but I did grow up still with privilege and their sacrifice. And those things have motivated me to want to give back to my community. I think what separates myself from Mr. Grayeb is this perspective to try new ideas, backed by research and data, to move our city forward and be laser focused on those deep systemic challenges that we haven't dealt with for decades.
Thank you. Councilman Grayeb, a rebuttal? Would you like to move on?
I would like to rebut that.
This is a 1-minute rebuttal.
The idea that Peter Kobak is a change agent is false. The real change comes when you go down to City Hall and you fight for your constituents. And sometimes you will not get 5 colleagues to agree with you, and you cannot always count to 6 out of 11 to carry the day. The most important reflection of the values of this community is our city budget. And I have fought hard year after year after year, and the people of the 2nd District know this, to ensure that the budget has a human face. And we will continue to do that in the years ahead if reelected.
Thank you, Councilman. Now moving on to our second question. This is a kind of long question, so make sure you guys are paying attention because there are multiple reactions from residents. As you both know, we've experienced some of the most controversial events that continue to threaten the sanctity of the United States democratic process, starting with the insurrectionists storming the Capitol, seriously injuring a Capitol officer and killing another. Murderers of unarmed African Americans who potentially sometimes hide behind a badge. And young people of every race, sex, creed coming together to protect and protest in the name of Black Lives Matter. Also, we're going through voter suppression legislation that is being proposed in 43 states by legislators driven by pure racism framed as Jim Crow 2.0. For the next few weeks, we are in the midst of one of the most racially explosive trials regarding the lynching of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin that was witnessed in every home in America and also abroad. Recently, Councilman Grayeb, you circulated a political mailer that allegedly from a post from candidate Kobak. This mailer shows the head of George Floyd being carried by a group with the subject line regarding Minneapolis city council members intend to defund and dismantle the city's police department. This mailer has sparked some voter disgust on both sides and calls for several organizations demanding an explanation of what's going on. And we will right now give both of you 2 minutes to explain your position and then possible for a 1 minute rebuttal if you'd like to. We're going to start again with Councilman Grayeb.
I'm a man of my word. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and I stand by what I say. The questions you may have to ask are to my opponent, Mr. Kobak, who has proposed doing to the city of Peoria what they started to do to the city of Minneapolis and then retreated because it was such a disaster, a complete and total disaster. Crime is a problem for our society, and it affects everybody. And some of the biggest casualties, the largest casualties, are black and brown people in our country. I believe public safety should not be controversial. On January 6th, it certainly was not controversial when all of us felt we needed more police in the Capitol. The far left wing in this community and the far right wing in this community do not mean us well, and they're trying to divide us, and they're trying to stoke all kinds of division in our society. And our enemies, whether it be China or the Soviet Union, love it. Well, when you're a candidate and you make statements, you either stand by them or you do a flip-flop. And I'm afraid that's what the candidate is doing right now. I make no apologies for what's in the flyer. It's factual. And I would be happy to hear what my candidate friend, Mr. Kobak, would have to say about these Facebook posts and Change Peoria post.
So we'll have a pendulum swing right to you, candidate Kobak.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question being asked so that we can get into this. And I brought the mailer today because I received it at my house as well. And, you know, Mr. Grayeb has spent a lot of time and money too spreading mischaracterizations and insinuations that are meant to scare our neighbors into voting for him. And this also includes false accusations. So I wanted to take an opportunity to go through them. One, it says I have a secret personal agenda to remove law enforcement. Now, I don't. I have said that reimagining public safety means expanding public safety. It doesn't mean narrowing it. And it means implementing new staff that can support law enforcement by addressing the root causes of crime. And it's interesting that this mailer went out today on the same day that the Peoria Journal-Star published an article. And it starts, Chuck Grayeb said he doesn't want to defund the police. Peter Kobak said the same thing. Yet, that's not what you would get if you lived in the world of Chuck Grayeb's mailer. The second thing it says is that I couldn't resist the opportunity to campaign in a neighborhood where a homicide happened last week. I was particularly surprised to see this because we're campaigning in neighborhoods across the 2nd District every day of the week. And yes, last week, we were in the neighborhood before the homicide happened. When it happened, when I learned about this tragedy, I reached out to the victim's mother privately to see how I could offer support in any way. I didn't take the opportunity, like my opponent, to spend money and score political points on this tragedy. And finally, I think what makes me most sad about this is that instead of talking about the nearly 20 policies, ideas, and programs that I'm campaigning on, that the PJ Star has reported on, Mr. Grayeb wants to take social media posts that, yes, they're out of context. They've been edited and deleted since this was taken, and there was more context around it about what I believe. And I've taken the opportunity to expand on what I believe, and that's what I think it's worth debating today.
Thank you. I'm going to call that your 2-minute response to the question. So it's a little bit of a hot button issue. So, Councilman Grayeb, I'm going to give you a 1-minute rebuttal because of what our rules state here.
Thank you very much. The flyer speaks for itself. I didn't create these posts. I didn't call for a defunding of the Peoria Police Department. I didn't call for removing the police from our schools or freeing people from Peoria jails and prisons. That would be quite interesting to free people from Peoria jails and prisons who have killed others in our community or shot people to death or have been part of a pedophile ring, which we recently broke up in the northern part of District 2. Invest in care, not cops. We barely have 200 police today. 10 years ago, we had 250. Police, yes. But my proposal is that of addition, not subtraction. I want to add the mental health component and really beef it up, and that's what I will do if reelected in the next 4 years, especially in the wake of the pandemic. It is absolutely necessary. Now, he can retreat from this if he wants to, but it's here in black and white. It looks to me like he wants to change his position on it. And by the way, the Journal Star article was excellent and accurate.
1 minute.
Yeah, I would agree that the Journal Star is excellent and accurate, and I would take the opportunity to actually read it, where you can learn where I stand, where the Journal Star reports me as not anti-police, and as introducing actual programs like community navigators that would serve alongside police, or instead of police when police presence is not necessary in a certain call for service. So you can either believe the scare tactics that Mr. Grayeb is trying to share, or you can listen to me explain what I stand for and what I'm advocating for. I've explained that these posts were made almost a year ago, were immediately edited when I put them up to provide more clarification because I could sense there was a misunderstanding. And before I ran for office, I decided, you know what, these still don't well describe where I stand. I deleted them. And Mr. Grayeb knows that bringing them up is to provoke misunderstanding and fear, when these forums are supposed to be meant as an opportunity to debate the actual issues and policies that we might implement when elected.
Thank you. Councilman Grayeb, we're going to question 3. You've been a strong advocate for public safety, including our police and fire. However, during your tenure, the diversity hiring for results of our police and fire departments apparently do not reflect the same levels of support. What have you done during your tenure to ensure the attainment of the diversity goals for both departments?
Well, first of all, I supported the creation of the Chief Diversity Officer position, and the Council in general has worked very hard to enhance the minority staffing for all of our city departments, so it more nearly represents the demography of our city. Now, I can tell you one thing, cutting the police or cutting firehouses has not helped the minority population. Last in, first to go. And that's why I referred earlier to supporting budgets with a human face. We need police, fire rescue, and we need attention to code enforcement, which is a very important function. It's a quasi-police function, as well as the repair of our infrastructure. And everyone, I think, who lives in Peoria knows that. Now, I understand Mr. Kobak has a 20-point platform that might be more befitting running for a state office or a city office. I would like to know how he intends to fund some of these programs when we can't even pay for core basic services. But I would work to enhance mental health services with any of my colleagues, and we'll do that.
Candidate Kobak, as councilman, if elected, what will you do specifically to ensure that diversity?
Would I be able to provide
okay. If you want to do the rebuttal first, we can do that first. Yes.
Yeah.
1 minute, Devon.
Okay. So, if you go to my website, kobakforpeoria.com, you can learn about the policies that I'm promoting. You know, they will take collaboration with other council members. They will take finding revenue streams. Some of them are cost neutral, like setting environmental goals for the first time for the city of Peoria so that we can advance sustainability initiatives. Sometimes it's not paying more, sometimes it's spending money wiser. So Another one of my ideas is performance-based budgeting, which makes sure that our budget is based on data, not on the whims of a council person. And the thing is that we have money, as Councilman likes to claim credit for, coming from the federal government and the state government. So there is room to introduce positive ideas on how to spend money. And I think it's worth having ideas to debate rather than just talking about things as they are.
Okay, and if you'd like, we'll continue. And as councilman, if elected, what will you do specifically to ensure that diversity hiring goals for fire and department are attained?
So when it comes to the diversity goals in the city, I think we need to do a few things. For our strategic plan, we need to add racial equity as a priority. This means that whatever we do across the city will take a racial equity lens to it. And what that means, it will take into consideration how will certain policies and programs impact communities based on the opportunities and outcomes that they currently have. Because we know that certain folks, based on the color of their skin, have not had the same opportunities as others. And when it comes to building a more diverse pipeline, we need to attack the root causes of why we don't have enough qualified candidates. It's because so many people are held back by lack of affordable housing, lack of economic opportunity, lack of educational support, and support for mental health services and addiction services. But I think what council can do to start, in addition to the adding racial equity, is recruit a diverse leadership to lead the departments in the city.
Councilman Grayeb, 1 minute rebuttal.
I'm not going to engage in a lot of buzzwords and cliches. I'm going to talk specifically about something we can do, and we should begin to do, and I believe we are starting to work on it right now, and that is to see what we can do to be sure that we have more provisions for our homeless people and for our mentally ill people who are wandering around our streets all over the city. It doesn't matter what the district is. A number of years ago, the people of Peoria voted overwhelmingly in a referendum to replace the old Bellwood home that was aging for senior citizens with Headington Oaks. Now, wouldn't it be a shame if Headington Oaks got closed and we didn't use it to augment our mental health services? That's real. I'm not giving you lots of cliches. I'm not giving you a lot of buzzwords. I'm giving you something real that we need to work on. We have to have buy-in from the county board. And if reelected, I will continue to pursue that. I know that at the highest level, there are discussions along these lines. And this is something concrete we could do. We need another equivalency of New Hope apartments with supportive assistance for people. And that's what a compassionate city would do, and we need to work on that.
Thank you. Moving on to question 4. I'm going to start with candidate Kobak. As you know, right now we've got an interim police chief in office right now, and we will be hiring a new chief. Even though the city manager is responsible for the hiring, the council's input is integral in this process. Now, what is the most important attribute that the chief of police must possess in your opinion, and how will you gauge if his or her future performance is successful or not?
So I think there are 2 things that are important when we consider who our next chief of police will be. One will they earn the respect and trust of the community? And I'm going to be looking at their background and their experience about how well have they done that in the past. And it's no secret, we have a diverse community. So they've got to be able to show, either through personal experience or professional experience, that they can make that connection. And second is, will they earn the support of the rank and file of the department? So are they someone who can be a leader and a visionary that can take our police department and take it to the next level and improve it? I personally believe that we need someone who is willing to reimagine public safety, who can step into the role and not do things as they have always been done, but try to think outside of the box to address the root causes of crime and understand how a police department and a greater public safety department can come together around preventing crime before it happens. Mr. Grayeb brought up in his mailer the tragic homicide last week. And I think the police department did an excellent job responding to the scene, and they fulfilled their role. But the truth is that with 5 more police officers on the scene, the outcome probably would have been the same, because we need to be better at serving residents before things escalate and meeting their needs before someone responds to a violent occurrence. It doesn't mean getting rid of police. It doesn't mean getting rid of law enforcement, but it means getting better at looking at the underlying causes. And that's what I'll be looking for when we evaluate who the next chief of police will be.
Councilman Grayeb, you can have 1 minute to rebut.
Well, it's a misapprehension that staffing doesn't matter. When I was in education, it mattered whether you had 40 kids in a first grade class or 22, what kind of results you would get with our police department in solving crimes, our detective division, et cetera. Manpower staffing matters, fire rescue services, et cetera. So at some point, we have cut almost 200 plus jobs, city jobs. If you don't think that's having an impact on service delivery for the constituents in District 2, not to mention the rest of the city, you are wrong. As for our next police chief, remember one thing. Let's make certain one thing is absolutely clear. The city manager makes that selection. Now, a wise city manager through the years has always run any of his selections past the governing board, meaning the city council. And he can listen to all of us. There will be stakeholders involved in this, but the city manager will make the final decision. And I think Lauren Marion did a tremendous job. And I think we should look best candidate both inside and out.
So we're going to walk back, Councilman Grayeb. I'm going to ask you the same question. Now, what do you think the most important attribute that the chief of police must possess, and how will you gauge if his or her future performance is successful or not?
Well, one of the most important things we need to do is what the Journal Star has very correctly reported and attributed to me, and that is Chief Marion's position on peer mentoring. If an officer is having stress, he should not worry about sharing it with one of his peers and getting the help that's needed without it ending up in his personnel folder. Chief Marion understood the importance of good mental health with not only the police department, but frankly, with all of our employees. The council was recently informed that we had very low morale across many departments, and I can see why. When we put their very jobs on the ballot, which we're doing, and I voted against that, on April 6th, that is a huge slap across the face, and I would never support that. We know what the answer is going to be to that question. I'd rather put another question on the ballot. Would you support core basic services or a subsidy to the fat cats for the Pierre Marquette or some other corporate bailout program? And we'll see how they'd answer on that.
Thank you. Candidate Kobak, a 1 minute rebut.
Sure. I wanted to bring up something that Mr. Grayeb mentioned, which is when I used the word racial equity, calling that simply a buzzword. What racial equity is the idea that we need to take into account how different populations in our community, different races in our community have experienced different opportunities when it comes to education, housing, economics, across the gamut. It's not a buzzword. It's about intentionality. It's about speaking the truth of the situation in our community and being intentional about taking steps to address those things. I don't speak in buzzwords. I speak in what will actually push progress for everyone in the 2nd District.
Thank you. Alrighty, moving on to question 5, we're going to begin with Councilman Grayeb. For years, citizens have watched while the city services, police and fire personnel, public service jobs, public safety equipment continue to be cut. We're continuing where we were. Now with the 2021 $3.7 million shortfall in the budget, an additional fee has been imposed on the taxpayers for police and fire pensions. Is the problem of the city council giving poor direction to the city manager, or does city management lack vision to offer new and innovative alternatives to achieve a balanced budget?
None of the above. The problem emanates from Springfield, and everyone in this room knows what happened beginning under the Edgar administration. We've had bipartisan neglect, which now we're forced to deal with at the local level, of not funding our pensions properly. The money should have gone into a lockbox, and it should have been left alone, Mr. Hendricks. And that's exactly why we find ourselves in this predicament today. A lot of people like to blame City Hall for everything. I'm sorry, but we do not rule the world. And there are a lot of problems that have to be solved at a higher level. We've got to work with our federal and state lawmakers to make things better. Now, we've got a potential infrastructure bill about to be passed. It's going to have huge ramifications for the city, depending on which part of it is passed. It's acceptable, whether it's human infrastructure or actual physical infrastructure. And we will have the opportunity to not only deal with that, but also rebuild our city in accord with the consent decree that we settled with the EPA that will require us to rebuild our city a la the green model. And I was there when we fought the EPA. We fought the EPA to do the green model. They wanted us to do a 40-foot trench not too far from where we sit down by the river with foreign contractors, not local union labor, to remedy the runoff problem into the Illinois River. That was insane. We had to litigate that. We had to litigate the amount of money they wanted us to spend. It started out being $250 million. You want to talk about taxes to the people of Peoria. We finally worked something out where it's about $110 million spanning 18 years to rebuild roads, alleys, curbs, gutters, and do all of this while we have the money, thanks to our state lawmakers. We can blame them for some things, but give them credit for others. And we are going to move ahead, I think, in the years ahead. And I think we're going to see Peoria transform dramatically.
Candidate Kobak, a 1-minute rebut.
Actually, I'm ready to take on the question, yeah.
We'll dive right in.
Yeah. All right, so the question, can you repeat it actually, just so
Yes.
I make sure to cover everything?
I'll start from the beginning. For years, citizens have watched the citizens have watched while city services, we're going to go with fire, police, personnel, public service jobs, and equipment continue to be cut. Now, with a 2021 $3.7 million shortfall, an additional fee has been imposed on taxpayers for police and fire pensions. Is the problem the city council giving poor direction to the city manager, or does city management lack vision to offer new and innovative alternatives to achieve a balanced budget?
So Mr. Grayeb spent his time talking about the state and the federal government. I want to spend my time talking about what City Hall has done and what City Hall can do. It has been decades of kicking the can down the road of properly funding our public safety pensions. And I think Mr. Grayeb, as someone who's running in 1993 for the first time and been in office for 20 years, could have done more, or should have at least signaled the warning sign that this was coming, because could have guessed that it would have meant cuts for personnel. Also, we've sprawled as a city from 1950 to today. We've quadrupled the geographic size of our city, but our population has stayed the same. And Mr. Grayeb has supported the urban growth cell strategy, which caused us to sprawl and caused us neglect in our core neighborhoods. Now, I'm here today to start offering some solutions, because to get out of this, I'm not going to wait for the state or federal government. Of course, we need to continue lobbying them, and any council member will do that, including myself. But we got to talk about solutions. We got to grow our population, and we got to grow economic development equitably in the city of Peoria. I've been talking about policies that would support economic development. One is focusing on incremental development. This is folks who live in their neighborhood who want to invest a little bit of money in the storefronts or the houses next to where they live. They're not trying to make a huge profit. We held workshops for this at the city and started multiple businesses based on these workshops. This is a cheap way to stimulate business locally by focusing on the small businesses and entrepreneurs rather than the big corporations. I've also been proposing a land bank, which is a way for the city to turn vacant and underutilized land back into productive use, so it's generating property taxes for the city. Now, I worked as a recruiter for Peoria Public Schools, and I believe I can recruit any young person to come live in Peoria and work in Peoria and make a life for themselves here. It'll help if they see someone that they can relate to around the horseshoe.
Thank you. Councilman Grayeb, a 1-minute rebut.
Well, other than the ageist comment that was just made from someone who should be more politically correct, I'm proud of my experience and what I've done to help the people of Peoria, and I don't run away from it. But I will say this, and I've heard you say this before, and I'm going to challenge it again. Our growth strategy has helped to prevent the city of Peoria from being landlocked like Peoria Public Schools, which cannot grow. That's why you have the Dunlap School District almost half the size, probably a little more than that, of Peoria Public Schools with about 14,000 pupils. That would have been untenable for the city of Peoria. So the growth strategies were devised to help expand our city. And there's nothing wrong with the growth strategies. Your plan would have landlocked us, much as 150 was landlocked, and it would make Peoria about double the size of Creve Coeur. Is that really the Peoria you think is going to draw the Zoom community here, or the millennials who are here in large numbers in the 2nd District? And by the way, I know many of them, and they're continuing to come.
Kind of walking back just a little bit, because I heard you guys both go to the subject of the pensions, and we're blaming Springfield, but the actual fees are still sitting in Peoria. So we've got residents that are asking, is this going to be sunset, or is this something that we're going to continue to have to pay, and why and who is going to be supportive in keeping this fee on the books for us as residents? I'll start with you, candidate Kobak.
So that's why I think this is why it's so important to talk about strategies for economic development in our communities, because we need to find ways to increase revenues so that we can afford to pay for the basic services that we need as a city. But when we will be reevaluating the fees and taxes that have been introduced, here's the way that I'm going to approach them. I'm going to approach them ensuring that from an equitable perspective, once again, which ensures that those who have more will contribute more, and those who have less will not be asked for more. Because when someone is struggling to pay the bills, living paycheck to paycheck, which more than a fifth of our community is, they cannot afford to pay another bill. And it's not just a matter of whether they're going to leave Peoria or not. It's a matter of what are they going to do when they can't feed their kids. And that's what I'm going to be thinking about, is that we have basic services we need to maintain. If we do need to collect revenue, do it in an equitable, progressive way. But to head off that necessity, let's advance ideas that could generate economic development in the 2nd District and across the entire city of Peoria.
2 minutes, Councilman Grayeb.
Well, for the life of me, I don't understand exactly what you would be legislating or the specifics. It's as usual, quixotic and general and very much cliche. And I think that needs to be avoided, especially when one is running for office. When I was training to be an educator and took all those pedagogy classes at Bradley University, there was one big word after another that was supposed to impress people. But the fact of the matter is, you finally have to talk to people with your shirt sleeves. Take off the suit coat and give specifics. Give specifics. Now, some of the things that have been done to help alleviate the pension pressure on our people, which my opponents should know about, has already been done at the state level, and we'll see, we have to wait and see to what extent it will ameliorate the pressure on municipalities all across the state. And that was Governor Pritzker re-amortizing all of our pensions. That's a big step forward. Also, beginning the Tier 2 employee level, where you're coming in at a less high level of pay than before. It will be a number of years before we'll know whether that's going to be sufficient to solve our problem. But we have begun to move in that direction. We have to give our state lawmakers credit for trying to get this resolved. At least they're doing something specific. More needs to be done.
Now, I included that as a subcomponent, so we can move on, or if you have a rebut. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Candidate Kobak, you can rebut 1 minute.
Yeah, so I'm kind of confused because Mr. Grayeb started that comment by saying one has to provide detailed policies, and I've mentioned incremental development workshops. I've mentioned land banking. I haven't gotten a chance to mention that I would propose reduced fees for small business owners and incremental developers to get their foot in the door, making sure that city staff provide alternatives to permits that they reject so that folks understand how they can continue to run their business even if the initial plan that they proposed didn't work out. ensuring that big developers work with the community by forming community benefit agreements. These aren't buzzwords, these are actual plans. And then what I heard Mr. Grayeb say after that is what Governor Pritzker has done in the last year. Well, that doesn't tell me much about what to expect if electing Mr. Grayeb again. And I don't have anything against Mr. Grayeb as a person. I don't have any space or time for personal attacks. But I'm just confused by asking for detail from me and then failing to provide it himself.
Councilman Grayeb, 1 minute.
Well, let me give you the detail that you would need, and that is you have to find 6 people around the horseshoe to agree to whatever program you have. And we have funded many of the things that you have spoken of. We are the recipient of all kinds of community development block grant money. Unfortunately, it's been going down over the past few years, which help community organizations all across the city. We have an evaluation process for that. We also have coming, very specifically, I'm going to be specific, what looks like a huge influx of money to help our township governments. And that will be very important to our indigent and people who utilize the township office. I've enjoyed being the liaison to all of our township offices. We have a new site at the top of Main Street Hill. And that's going to mean a lot to help people bridge this pandemic and move on to more normal times. That's very specific. But you'll have to get people to buy in to whatever you want to do. And we're already doing a lot of these things. The 4.5 million, I'm sorry, ran out of time.
Thank you for allowing time. All right, we're going to go back to candidate Kobak. We're going to say, as you know, there cannot be equality without socioeconomic equity. Now, Black residents in Peoria have one of the highest poverty rates in the state with a median income of $28,000, which is 46.4% of white residents' median income. The poverty rate here is 34.5% compared to 9.3% for white Peorians. As councilman, if elected, how will you work toward reversing this trend, and how will you lead your other elected officials and community leaders and concerned citizens to participate?
This is a great question, and of course, I was hopeful equity would come up and that it wouldn't just be dismissed as a buzzword, because it's really important. It alludes to what you said, Mr. Hendricks, the real disparities in our community. And that's why I don't want to rely on just having one program to fix it. I'm advocating that racial equity is actually a way that is implemented into our strategic plan. So it is a lens that we approach every project in the city with, so that whether or not I'm served for 4 years or 20 years, that this becomes a lifeblood of the city, a way that the city makes decisions taking into account what's happened in the past. And it's important for the city to take into account what's happened in the past, because the city's played a role in the disparities in our community. It doesn't mean that it's Mr. Grayeb's fault or any of the council members' fault. The institution has played a role, though. And so the institution has to be there bringing forward a solution. Some of the things that I will be advocating for is ensuring that our departments are representative of our city, that leadership in those departments is representative of this city, and pushing the city manager to do so. I also think that it's important, as we talk about these infrastructure funds that are coming, I'm very hopeful and very excited for the redevelopment of West Main Street and the riverfront and other funds from the federal government. We need to be thinking right now about the minority pipelines that need to be developed before those jobs come up to bid. Because when they come up to bid, I'm sure a lot of people have heard it, hey, I can't find this minority contractor to do this job. Well, Mr. Grayeb right now is a councilman, and myself when I'm elected, we need to be thinking about this right now so that we can hire a representative workforce to build the city of the future. Not just talking about the funds and how great they'll be, but what we'll do to make sure those funds go as far as they can to ensure that when you read statistics about the color of someone's skin, you can't predict how well they'll do in life.
Thank you. Councilman Grayeb, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, apparently my opponent has been watching too many council meetings, because every major contract that comes before us, questions are asked about minority hiring. And before we sign on to any proposal For example, the Sheridan Road, $4.5 million project, which people are very happy about, from Eleanor down to Peoria High School down to Richmond, was heavy minority, and we continue to do that. Apparently, that's been hiding in plain sight for my opponent. He doesn't see that. We continue to try to involve as many minorities as we can in everything that we do. And so it's going to continue in a very radical, wonderful way, and radical I mean positive here, when we rebuild the city to comply with the EPA requirements with the green model. That's going to be the biggest public works project in the history of the city, and a lot of minorities are going to be hired for that. You watch and you see. And we are there as council members to ensure that everybody gets, every group gets their fair share.
Thank you. And I'm going to stay with you, Councilman Grayeb, and I'm going to repeat and go to the same question, which is, as you know, there cannot be equality without socioeconomic equity. Black residents in Peoria have one of the highest poverty rates in the state, with a median income of $28,000, which is 46.4% of white residents' median income. The poverty rate is 34.5% compared to 9.3% for white Peorians. As a previous at-large councilman and a two-term District 2 councilperson, what actions have you taken to reverse this trend, and have you tried to influence your other councilpersons to support your efforts?
Well, very specifically, what program would you be advocating for that we haven't already done, for which we have a funding source? That's why I'm sorry, I have to continue to say that not every problem can be solved at 419 Fulton. We are part of a total financial, fiscal picture. We have to work with our state lawmakers. We have to work with our federal lawmakers. A good example, I just mentioned the opportunities that are around the corner with the EPA settlement, but we also have an infrastructure plan that's supported by both the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Association of Manufacturers, and believe it or not, a lot of Republicans, which would rebuild our roads, our bridges, our rail lines, our airports. We'd have electric vehicle charging stations. We'd work on the electric grid, which was so important to Texas when it went down. Caterpillar stock has gone up with the announcement of this, if we can get it passed in the Congress. Clean energy, 5G telecommunications. This is very important. Better high-tech opportunities for all of our citizens. And I think with that particular legislation being passed in Washington, D.C., we'll see a huge improvement, and also with the implementation of the consent decree. So I think our better days are ahead.
Thank you.
Could I have a quick rebuttal to that?
I was coming to you. Yep, 1 minute
Thank you,
rebuttal.
sir. So I am advocating that, of course, we can only control our budget and our programs and our policies, but we can do so intentionally. We can do so by prioritizing the environment, by prioritizing equity, and we have to acknowledge that those are factors to consider when we make our decisions, or else we will continue to ignore them. And my advocacy on this issue hasn't only been as a candidate for Peoria City Council. It's been in my experience as a community organizer and a leader in local government. And that's what's earned me the endorsement of the Peoria PAC for African American Concerns, a political action committee whose mission it is to advance the interests of African Americans in Peoria.
Thank you. I started last with you, candidate Kobak, so we're going to go with community police relations. That's going to be with Councilman Grayeb. We're going to start here. There are many unsolved violent crimes in our city. Yes. Many believe it is due to lack of confidence in the current police system. Do you believe there needs to be police reform with emphasis on community policing?
Yes. Yes, and as a matter of fact, I think most every member of the Peoria City Council thinks that we need to beef up our residential officer program, but again, it takes money. And that's the cold, hard fact. It takes money to do that. The residential officer program allows the resident officer to get to know the people best in his territory. I can't say her right now, but I wish I could. But it takes money, and I know that previous police chiefs have been very interested in expanding that program. We have 2 resident officers in the heart of our city in District 2. I believe it's a successful program, and yes, I believe we need to do more along those lines.
Thank you. Candidate Kobak, a 1-minute rebuttal, or you want to dive straight in?
Dive straight in. Let's do it.
Okay. I'll give you the question again. There are many unsolved violent crimes in our city. Many believe that it is due to lack of confidence in the current police system. Do you believe that there needs to be police reform with emphasis on community policing?
Yes, I do. And I'm proposing initiatives that I hope would build trust between the community and police. And I'm glad to be able to share some of those today. One is supporting the creation of community navigators. These would be folks who sometimes work either alongside or instead of police to support the underlying causes of crime and provide support services for folks. They might be a social worker, a mental health worker, an outreach worker. And the thing is, when tried in other communities, take up maybe 1% of the police department's budget, but end up assisting on 13 to 20% of calls. And we have such a wonderful healthcare industry in Peoria that I think they would be happy, and I will lobby them as a city council member to advance these initiatives in Peoria so that we can be a model for the rest of the country, so that the community knows that they will have the appropriate expertise for the problem that they're facing. Because law enforcement has a very expert set of skills, but it doesn't apply to every call for service that they have to arrive at. That's why I want to expand the notions of what public safety is. I also would advocate creating public safety opportunity zones. And these would take a look at, based on data, where is crime happening in the city, or where are there high rates of contact with the police that aren't connected to crime, and ensure that we are focusing resources, whether they're economic development or infrastructure, in those areas. And finally, I'm advocating that we strengthen the Police Community Advisory Commission so that people have trust that if something does happen, God forbid, that is a violation of someone's rights, that they have a channel where they can pursue that claim and be heard. Those are actual ways that we might be able to reimagine public safety to build trust between the community and the public safety realm in City Hall.
Thank you. Councilman Grayeb, 1-minute rebuttal.
Well, it's not a rebuttal, it's just that it's so general, I don't know what that means. I do know that we have a very excellent police community relations commission that works very closely with the police department. I believe Rita Ali, who's currently running for mayor, has served with distinction on that. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there are a lot of things that we're doing right, but I'm going to be honing in very closely again, very specifically on what I said earlier. We need to beef up the mental health component. We need to have somebody on staff in conjunction, contract with Unity Point, whatever, I don't care what the turf is, to help our police when there is clearly a call that involves a psychiatric component. That needs to be done, and we need to use a facility such as Headington Oaks to address the mental health needs of our citizens. We need one more supportive living project similar to New Hope to help our people. And I think we have metrics on that. I know we have metrics on it. I remember we had a mayor a number of years ago who was always talking about metrics. He had spreadsheets. He knew all the numbers, but he didn't understand what was really going on out in the neighborhoods. So metrics mean one thing, but it's how we construe the metrics. More on that later.
Okay, Councilman Grayeb. Thank you. All righty, we're moving on to our next question. We're going to start with candidate Kobak, but I'm going to start with a disclaimer to make sure that everyone is advised that in no way does this question suggest that reparations for systemic racism that have plagued African Americans since 1619 can be resolved through revenues for the sale of cannabis. But the City Council of Evanston, Illinois has approved the nation's first reparations program for African American residents whose families have been impacted by the effects of decades of discriminatory housing practices. The first initiative of the $10 million plan is called Restorative Housing Reparations Program. That will distribute up to $25,000 for housing per eligible resident, with funding coming from 3% tax from recreational marijuana sales. I'm going to start with candidate Kobak. What are your views on a policy like this, and would you even think about implementing something like this in the city of Peoria?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this is an example of when a city steps up and does the right thing and is the first one to do the right thing, they get national recognition for it. That's why I'm advocating that we step up and be innovative and try new things so that we can get national attention for them as well. Because one of the things I learned when recruiting people for Peoria Public Schools, young people to come work in each of our 27 schools, is that I couldn't change the salary and I couldn't change the commute between Peoria and Chicago or Indianapolis or the amount of flights in our airport. But I could tell them about what is the mission and vision of Peoria Public Schools, that it was seeking to change outcomes for young people in our community. And I want to be able to say the same thing for young people that I talk to about Peoria, that our city hall has a vision and mission that stands above the rest of the country. And if you want to be in a city that is making waves for progress and making waves for equity, then it's time to move to Peoria. By the way, we have affordable housing and we're not too far from Chicago or St. Louis or Indianapolis. That's how you sell a city, but it has to be part of the mission and vision of the organization. Now, when it comes to reparations, we do have potential funds coming from the federal government as well as cannabis sales. I think those funds need to be put back into the community. They should not be for city coffers. They should be used to ensure that folks who have been marginalized in the past are given the support they need so that we can't predict how someone does in life based on their gender, their race, or other ability or disability. And so I'm open to the conversation because I think we need to be thinking about how our institution of City Hall can right wrongs.
And Councilman Grayeb, would you like to rebut, or would you like the context of the question, or what would you like to do, sir?
Well, I think Governor Pritzker and the General Assembly has already moved light years down the road to provide some assistance to our minority communities as a result of the decriminalization of cannabis. And our state lawmaker, Jahan Gordon Booth, has worked tirelessly to help make that possible. So I think that's kind of like off the table. We must continue, though, to work to that end, because a disproportionate number of minorities were affected and convicted by the cannabis laws that existed for far too many years. So I would say that we need to continue in that regard, and anything that we come up with by way of a program, we have to have a funding source. And the state did provide a funding source for that.
Now, you were allowed a 1-minute rebut, so I'm going to count that as your 2-minute response. Did you have a 1-minute rebut, Councilman? To be fair?
No, I don't. At this time, I have no rebuttal to make, but I reserve rebuttal right later on.
I don't know if we can hold over for another question. I appreciate it. You had to ask.
Would I have an opportunity to provide a rebuttal to whatever category of answer that was?
If he can't take one over, you can't hold one over either, man.
Well, no, that was his 2-minute response, right? And so now I would be able to get a 1-minute rebuttal?
If in that opportunity, yes, you do. Okay. You do. You will be allowed 1 minute.
Oh, got it. Okay. But he hasn't given his answer yet. Okay.
So, what I'm going to do now is we're going to open it up for audience participation. If anyone wants to ask candidate Kobak a question, please come up to the microphone.
Hello. So I'm Lauren Opper. I am the president of West Central Neighborhood Association. And I want to kind of touch on my area. So I'm just off of Sheridan. And we've just recently gotten the Sheridan corridor opened. The road work has been redone. It's beautiful. We love it. That's great. But it's allowing people to go from essentially Main Street to the other side of 2nd District without staying in the heart of 2nd District. What would you propose for these small businesses along that Sheridan corridor to help people want to stay in the heart of 2nd District?
2 minutes, candidate.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Lauren. I have 2 things that I'm going to be suggesting. One is that as we redevelop West Main Street, which will be a huge redevelopment in Peoria, that we not only keep people on West Main Street, but we use that money to direct people, whether it be through signage or whatnot, to explore the rest of the 2nd District. Because I live close to West Main Street and I love it, but there's so many other great parts of the 2nd District that should be explored and enjoyed by either Peorians or visitors. So I want to make sure that when that project occurs, it's encouraging people to go visit other parts of the district, including Sheridan and University and Knoxville and Sterling and all the places in between that are landmarks in our 2nd District. Now, secondly, this is why it's so important to have ideas and policies around how we can support small business owners to invest in the vacant spaces on Sheridan. Because what we have been doing isn't working. Most of those spaces, many of those spaces have sat vacant for very long, and we're waiting for, I don't know, a Hail Mary to come from out of town or out of state to come in and swoop in. When, I know folks, I've got friends who live in those neighborhoods who are invested in the neighborhood and could use the support to start up their business or grow their business into one of those storefronts. I'm going to be directing city staff and working on programs with city staff to encourage those small-scale developers, those folks who might have some time on the weekends or want to transition into working a local business in one of those stores. Because those stores, those small business owners, they will be there to stay. Unlike big box stores and out-of-town developers, they come and then they go. So my focus is going to be on supporting the small business owners and entrepreneurs who are already in the 2nd District or in Peoria to locate there, as well as take the funding and infrastructure money that's coming and use it to benefit other parts of the district as well.
Okay, we'll allow Councilman Grayeb 2 minutes.
Well, I couldn't agree more. If it were simply a matter of money, Sheridan Triangle would be one of the best shopping areas in the city because my predecessor provided all kinds of facade money to Craig Upholstery, to a tavern across the street from Craig Upholstery, et cetera, to redo their facade work. Now, we've had a number of retirements there. I frequent all the businesses I can in the city of Peoria, and certainly in District 2. We have the tailor shop, the Tony Gantos tailor there. I frequent that. I go there for all of my needs. I go to the furniture store across the street. That gentleman drives to Peoria all the way from Gridley, Illinois every day. I've bought several $100s worth of furniture there recently. He has great merchandise. You should go in and see it. But we had some people grow old, close their business. Strode Music, that accounts for one. Dudley, I'm sorry that is closed. Great ice cream, but right now we have some folks interested in doing something really neat there. I can't announce it tonight. But we also have the old Trico copier. That guy simply was getting old and wanted to retire. One of the first things I did after I was elected was to go with staff to the Sheridan Triangle and meet with all the business operators. And we encouraged them to form a business improvement corridor. And at that time, they weren't interested in doing it, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't be interested in doing it in the future. One of the problems we had along there with one of the businesses was an illegal massage parlor. We closed that sucker down. It's called human trafficking. That's unacceptable. We're not anti-business, but we cannot make things happen when people are not doing right by themselves. Retirements, I can't stop. As for the gas station at Sheridan Road and McClure, it has been a problem, a law enforcement issue, and we met with the owner of Cooper's Gas at the police station to see that she would do a better job encouraging people to move on who are trespassing or involved in other aberrant conduct.
We could have a 1-minute rebuttal.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on. Is there another question that we've got from the audience?
Oh, actually, can I take that back? Is it too late?
It is not too late.
Okay, I appreciate the grace. Well, before working in government, I have a background as a community organizer, and so in addition to the policies and the programs and the research and the data that inform my positions, I also roll up my sleeves and do work in the community. I mentioned that I volunteer for neighborhood associations, for food pantries, for the mutual aid network in Peoria. But during the campaign, I thought it was important that I knew that small businesses were suffering in the pandemic. So I made a list of all the small businesses, or most of the small businesses that had social media presences or links or website. Some of them that didn't, I included as well. And I created a holiday gift guide for folks in the 2nd District and all of Peoria. And I promoted it as much as I could. It's not solving the problem, but it's thinking on your feet, rolling up your sleeves, and seeing what you can do. Because it's one thing to say shop local, and it's another thing to create a holiday gift guide that actually tells people what we have in our district. Because some folks didn't know about all the awesome things we had.
And since candidate Kobak took advantage of the 1 minute rebuttal, do you want to take the same 1 minute, Councilman?
Well, I don't know they rebutted anything because West Main Merchants Association does a lot. The merchants in the Sheridan Triangle are doing a lot to build things up. The stretch of University from Forest Hill to War Memorial Drive is one of the biggest sales tax generator in the city. That's in the heart of District 2, where we redid University Street and got rid of a lot of those lines, moving them off to one side. Also, we have a development of a credit union beginning at the old Manning Macomb lot there because of the very good work of our staff and the support of the people in the neighborhoods. So there's a lot going on. I guess this must be hiding in plain sight. We have First Fridays up on West Main, and we're going to continue to work with all the merchants in our district to help those businesses flourish.
Okay, and what we asked for before was an audience member to come and ask candidate Kobak for a question. So now we'll also ask if someone wants to ask Councilman Grayeb a question. You can.
I got one for Peter.
Oh, is there anyone for Councilman Grayeb?
I can ask a question. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Chris McCall. I'm a business owner in the 2nd District. I own McCall offices in Halliday McCall. There was a lot of discussion earlier in the debate about homeless people wandering, and I was curious about the change, about that choice of words. I wanted to find out, as a city council person, what have you done during the pandemic to assist those homeless people with getting jobs and finding overnight places to stay and places to stay during the day?
2 minutes, Councilman Grayeb.
Very good question. One of the things that I strongly stressed to our staff and made the comments very publicly on the council floor was we must do something to help our homeless and those who have mental issues. And we do have a homeless continuum, and we have people who have worked for the city of Peoria who are involved in this, who are, matter of fact, part of the innovation team. And they did their very best to accommodate as many of these people as possible in a motel, getting a lot of the folks who are huddled underneath the bridge out of there. That is unacceptable in the city of Peoria, totally unacceptable. And our city manager realized that, and there isn't anybody on the council that finds that acceptable. People freezing on the street, etc. But as I have repeatedly said, and I'll say it again tonight, we need at least one more New Hope supportive housing project to take care of most of the needs of our homeless. Now, there are some homeless people because of mental issues who will never, ever conform. And those are going to be very difficult situations to deal with when someone will decline or refuse services. But I think we can do a great deal to ameliorate 90+% of our problem by utilizing a facility such as Headington Oaks to create that additional space that we need for our homeless. We do not want to look like San Francisco or Seattle or Portland or any of these places where people are wandering around like shreds of human debris. They are not that. They are somebody's brother, they're somebody's sister, somebody's father, somebody's mother. And this city council is committed to addressing this problem, and the city manager worked hard to deal with that, and I'm proud of his involvement in getting assistance. But again, we need more, and we'll work to get more in the 4 years ahead.
Candidate Kobak?
Yes. So I want to take the privilege of pretending Chris asked me the question and then have my rebuttal. I'll do it in a minute though. One thing I did during the pandemic is I helped support and start the Peoria Mutual Aid Network, and it's a network of many people who provide direct aid and support to folks less fortunate or who are on hard times. And I raised money. I delivered food directly to people experiencing homelessness so that they were less ravaged by the pandemic than they were the day before. It didn't solve the problem, but it's what I did springing into some sort of action in desperate times. Now, I do also want to bring up another thing that happened during the pandemic was that we saw more people experiencing homelessness on the community garden on West Main Street. And this was a big issue in our area because this garden had been around for nearly 8 years and had provided a lot of culture and programming to the community. And during the pandemic, that programming wasn't able to be held. Folks experiencing homelessness spent time there. And Mr. Grayeb was part of the effort to raise that garden to the ground. And what I'll say is that didn't provide housing for the people in the garden. It didn't provide resources to the folks struggling from addiction. And on top of that, it destroyed a community resource and a cultural space for the community that had been maintained for years and had been recognized by Mr. Grayeb and council members just a few months prior in city council.
Thank you. In the essence of time, I'm going to have to cut down our rebuts to 45 seconds.
Well, Peter Kobak continues to say that Chuck Grayeb raised the garden. It's something called private property. We respect that in the United States of America. A new owner took over, and he found all these folks milling around, hypodermic needles everywhere, defecating and urinating in broad daylight, deleterious to his business in a time of COVID, people approaching his customers. And his plan is to build a new store there in conformity with the form-based code. It'll have a second floor. City's working with him to be sure the gas pumps are behind it, looks better. And he wants to build, the new owner, a better store. And so he wanted it back because of all the distractions, and I don't blame him. I really don't. And I didn't raise that garden. I'm not the property owner, but Mr. Kobak continues to engage in that fantasy.
Candidate Kobak, 45 seconds.
Yeah, you can look up emails of Mr. Grayeb pushing city staff to have this garden raised to the ground. And the thing is, I'm not opposed to private property. I know sometimes Mr. Grayeb likes to pretend like maybe I'm a communist, even though my parents escaped a communist regime to come live in this country. But given whatever might have been the pressures put on Mr. Grayeb to do something, I think it would have been in the best interest of the community to reach out to the stakeholders of the garden and not just the business owner to come up with a solution that could be amenable to everyone. Because people reached out to me afterwards and said, I wish you would have reached out. I would have helped clean up the garden. I would have taken some of those things home, and we would have had time to find a new community garden. It doesn't have to be anti the business owner or anti this. It can be multiple solutions at once.
Okay. I know we're running out of time. So, Sherry, do I have time for one more question? Yes, sir.
I'm Bob Knott. I live off on Hansler Place, just off University. I wrote this down because there's some technical terms I wanted to make sure I got. To attract new business, you have stated City Hall staff should make it easier and offer aid in finding ways to help navigate the city's red tape. You also stated we need a sustainable growth plan, which will require inclusionary zoning, which you state would require large developers to make a portion of their residential developments available or affordable, or contribute to a fund for affordable housing elsewhere. Don't those kind of conflict with each other? You're trying to make things easier for them, and then you want to more or less fine them?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I really appreciate that. And you stated the position well, and I appreciate you reading it out. Here's why I think they don't oppose. Because we, for a long time, have prioritized looking for that big fish, getting that next cat to locate in Peoria. And I don't see that that's worked. So my priority is going to be supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs, the little guys, to start, stay, and grow in the 2nd District. And in inclusionary zoning and in community benefit agreements, and I know they're technical terms, but there's a lot to them, is that if a big developer, and we can set that number of how big is their project, if they're coming in and if they receive some kind of incentive or subsidy from the city, then we ask for them in return to help us address some of these systemic challenges we have in our community. We've chased economic development at all costs. And what it's meant is big box stores in the north end of town that most of the folks in the 2nd District can't get to, struggle to get to, and that don't benefit us as much. And Walmart's own business model is basically to build a store and 20 years later expect that they'll leave it. They make profit regardless what happens after those 20 years. So my perspective is to chase economic development from within, to grow our own economic development rather than to go after the big fish somewhere else. Because when we have the storefronts on Sheridan Avenue lined with local business owners that are unique and invested in the community, then people will want more to live in those communities. And then big businesses like the Next Cat, they're going to look for where's that community that people are dying to move to, dying to live in. And it's not going to be because they have a Meijer or a Walmart or a Costco. It's going to be because they have these businesses along their neighborhoods that you can walk to and that you can, whatever it is, do your daily business and meet real people who live there who are paid a living wage.
And Councilman Grayeb, we're going to have you give your 2 minutes, and then we're going to move into our closing statements.
Well, we, of course, have to do everything we possibly can as a city to encourage small business. 2/3 of all the jobs in the United States of America are the result of our small business operation. We have an economic development department that works very closely with our small business. I get calls from small business people every week, and we plug them in. Just got a call from somebody on the West Main corridor who wants to do something really neat across the street from what's going to be the new township office, and we plug them in with our staff. You know we have a staff, Mr. Kobak, that is designed to help our small business people, but we can't discount what Mr. Kobak calls the big fish. One of the big fish right now, I guess, using your vocabulary, would be the medical community. We have become a huge medical colossus. We have a $250 million cancer center, for crying out loud, being built on the East Bluff. You don't think that creates jobs? Yes, we have to do both. We have to do small business, and we have to also swing that bat hard. We need to become a biomanufacturing hub. We have all the ingredients to do that with one of 5 federal labs right here in the city of Peoria, which unfortunately the Trump administration tried to close twice during the past 4 years. We can figure out what the next cure is for the next pathogen to come there. We figured out how to mass produce penicillin. So medical, we have to keep our eye on that. We have to make certain that our Caterpillar keeps as many jobs here as possible. And we have to take a look at this infrastructure bill that's going to be passed. It could be stripped down from what is being proposed, but it'll be about $2 trillion, which they can all agree on, to rebuild the infrastructure in Peoria. That's going to put people to work.
Thank you. We're going to move quickly to our 1-minute closing statements. So we're going to get started. Since you just ended, Councilman Grayeb, we're going to start with you, candidate Kobak, and then we're going to get out of here.
Okay, thanks. I thought I had 2 minutes, so I got to cut it in half. Well, I wanted to say I don't stand here just representing myself, but I stand here representing the thousands of people I've talked to during the campaign, the Bradley students that I've talked to that either didn't know there was an election or didn't feel engaged in it, the folks who sat out in elections before because they didn't think it mattered, the folks who have endorsed me, like Peoria PAC for African American Concerns, AFSCME Council 31, local elected leaders, local community leaders, and local advocacy groups. We stand in unison saying that we need innovation and new ideas to tackle the real systemic challenges in our community. And today, I've laid out what those challenges are, and I've also laid out a plan to get us there. And I mentioned before, my parents are immigrants who came from an oppressive communist regime to start a better life for my family here. It's hard for me to think about living up to their example, but it gives me the inspiration and the motivation to try to improve our community. So I hope you vote Peter Kobak for your next 2nd District City Council person.
Councilman Grayeb.
I'm very proud of the support that I've been given by not only the Peoria Police Benevolent Local 27, but also the Peoria firefighters who also put their lives on the line for us every day, Local 50, the West Central Building Trades, their offices not far from where we sit, the Teamsters Union on Allen Road. These are folks who believe in what I've been attempting to do and what I have been doing for this community for some 20 years. And this is called labor. And labor, whenever labor loses its right to collectively bargain and to stick up for better working conditions, we are now in an authoritarian regime. And we have in our country today extremes on both the left and the right who are trying to divide us. And never in 1,000 years will I support smashing labor unions, which happened in Poland. And I appreciate the personal reference because that is the hallmark of a dictatorship. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. It has truly been my honor to be moderator over this forum, and I will turn it over to Town Hall Co-Coordinator Sherry Cannon for our final thoughts. Sherry?
Thank you, sir. On behalf of Collaborative Peoria and the Monday Gathering, we'd like to first of all take an opportunity to thank our fabulous moderator, Leon Hendricks. Leon is always on, when I say, Leon, we need you, he shows up. So big respect for Leon. Also want to thank our candidates, Councilman Grayeb and candidate Mr. Kobak. Absolutely. You both have been very passionate. I think you've had a great opportunity tonight to share your platform. And so we wish you both best of luck. And April 6th, we'll see what the constituency of the 2nd District says. We also would like to thank the Peoria Housing Authority staff, in particular Holly and Lieutenant McCall, who has been so helpful to us, and also Chairman Carl Cannon for the use of this beautiful facility, the Frank Campbell Community Center. And we want to thank you especially, our live audience and our virtual audience, for showing up again tonight and spending time with us. Last week, March 25th, was the 56th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March, which precipitated the signing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act by President Lyndon B. Johnson. That right didn't come without a huge cost. Jimmy Lee Jackson, Reverend James Reeb, and Mrs. Viola Liozzo all lost their lives in Montgomery, Montgomery, Alabama, during this volatile time, fighting for rights for particularly black people of this country to vote. And it goes without saying that this right to the franchise is one of the most important rights we have. I would maintain that it's more than just a right. It's a sacred trust that we owe to all of those who fought and sacrificed for it and for us. So to that end, I really urge you to get out and vote. Early election is going on now, and election day is Tuesday, April 6th. And so please vote. And once again, we ask you to join us back here tomorrow night for our final segment of the town hall that's been put on by Monday Gathering and Collaborative Peoria for the candidates for Peoria City Council District 3. Thank you and good night.